All right, Grand Rising, sweet souls. We are diving back into the CIA Gateway Experience document. I will start out with the introduction to the Gateway Experience and what hemisync is. So in the document, it tells them that Gateway Experience involves hemispheric synchronization, or also known as hemisync. Which is the most effective way to begin to briefly profile the basic mechanics which underlay operation of related methods such as hypnosis, transcendental meditation, and biofeedback. It is the easiest to effectively describe what gateways by beginning with a short description of those techniques. So he goes on to explain, so hypnosis is basically so as Ronald Stone describes it, according to these theories of the psychologist Ronald Stone and the biomedical engineering models of Ishtak Bentov, hypnosis is basically a technique which permits the acquisition of direct access to the sensory motor cortex and pleasure centers and the lower cerebral emotional portions and the associated pleasure centers of the stimulus screening function of the left hemisphere of the brain. So basically the left hemisphere of the brain is for self-cognitive, verbal, and linear reasoning component of the mind, which fulfills the function of screening incoming stimuli by categorizing, assessing, and assigning meaning prior to allowing passage to the right hemisphere of the mind. So the left hemisphere basically is like our logical mind, right? It processes what's right or wrong, whether it's true or false, that kind of information. What else? Where am I? The right hemisphere, which functions as the non-critical, holistic, nonverbal, and pattern-oriented component of the brain, appears to accept what the left hemisphere passes to it without question. So that's our brain that doesn't have a filter. Like, we can tell ourselves, this is just an example, like we can tell ourselves we are ugly. And even if we're not ugly, our brain's going to hear it as true. So our subconscious mind is the yes brain of everything that we've heard in our lives, whether it be from peers, programming from our parents, from our schools, the emotional damage that we've received in our lives, that kind of stuff. It's all a yes. Even the negative stuff is a yes. So it's crazy. So the right hemisphere, functions non-critical. So consequently, if the left hemisphere can be distracted either through boredom or through reduction to a soporific semi-sleep state, external stimuli to include hypnotic suggestions are allowed to pass unchallenged into the right hemisphere, where they're accepted and acted upon directly. So remember, like hypnotists, like if they come to a subject and they'll like yank on their shoulder and arm or whatever, and they'll be like, sleep. And it puts the person in like they're not asleep, but they're in like a really, really relaxed state. And then they're able to tell them, when you wake up, you're a chicken. So you're going to walk like a chicken, right? That's basically what he's saying. The result may involve an emotional reaction originating in the lower cerebral region, sensory motor responses, and requiring involvement of the cortex, and so on. Both the sensory and the motor cortices of the right cerebral portion of the brain contain a sequence of points known as the homunculus, which corresponds to points in the body. So that is this. So this is the homunculus right here. And if you can't see it very well, I did include the link to the gateway document, and if you can't find the link, if somehow it doesn't work, how I found it to begin with was I put in CIA gateway experience, and it was like literally the first thing that came up for me. So it's super easy to find, but this is a drawing from the person. Like, I think he did pretty damn good. And then next speaks about transcendental. So, okay, basically, let me get back to the hypnosis. So stimulation of the corresponding area of the cortex causes intermediate responses in the associated portion of the body. So the induction of the suggestion that the left leg is numb, if it reaches the right cortex, will result in an electrical reaction being generated, which will induce the feeling of numbness. Similarly, the suggestion that the person is experiencing a general feeling of happiness and well-being would be referred to the appropriate pleasure centers located in the lower cerebral portion or in the cortex of the right hemisphere, thereby inducing the suggested feeling of euphoria. Suggestions such as the one that informs the hypnotic subject that he enjoys enhanced concentration or powers of memory would be responded in the right hemisphere by accessing unused information storage capacity normally held in reserve as a result, significant in the context of the gateway process when attention is given to examining the way that hypnosis may be used to accelerate progress in the early stages of the gateway experience. Pretty interesting. Okay, so the guy goes on and he explains transcendental meditation. Now he starts out by saying, obviously, on the other hand, transcendental meditation works in a distinctly different fashion. In this technique, intense and protracted single-minded concentration on the process of drawing energy up the spinal cord ultimately results in what appears to be creation of acoustical standing waves in the cerebral ventricles, which are then conducted to the gray matter in the cerebral cortex on the right side of the brain. So basically, it's Kundalini rising. Because he does speak right here. As a result, according to Bentov, these waves stimulate and eventually polarize the cortex in each way that it will tend to conduct a signal along the homunculus, starting from the toes and on up. So the Bentov biomedical model, which is described in a book entitled Kundalini Psychosis or Transcendence, states that standing acoustical waves are the result of the altered rhythm of heart sounds, which are occasioned by prolonged practice of meditation, and which set up sympathetic vibrations in the walls of the fluid-filled cavities, which comprise the third and lateral ventricles of the brain. So, Kundalini rising, Kundalini awakening, that's when you, from what I'm remembering through my research, it's when you like squeeze your perineum, right? It's like women doing Kegels, basically. That's what I can think of. And guys can do it too. However, with whatever they squeeze, I don't know. They squeeze the perineal, and we do squeeze it, and then take a big inhale and let that we let that breath come all the way up to our head. And it reaches in our pineal gland, right? Which is also known as the glass room in Qigong, right? Crystal room. And then you hold your breath for a little bit on the top. I don't know exactly how many seconds. And then you let it go and you release your perineum and it just, and you do that a few breaths, and that has stimulation. So when you do that, so the book states that the standing acoustical waves are a result of the altered rhythm of heart sounds, which are occasioned by prolonged practice of meditation, which set up sympathetic vibrations in the walls of the fluid-filled cavities, which comprise of the third and lateral ventricles. I said that, sorry. According to Bentov, these states of bliss described by those whose Kundalini symptoms have completed the full loop along the hemispheres may be explained as a self-stimulation of the pleasure centers in the brain caused by the circulation of a current along the sensory cortex. That's pretty interesting. Okay, sorry, I had to pause it because I had to use the restroom, and then I come back and I'm like, oh gosh, I hope the video is still going. But it is. Here we are. So Bentov also notes the most described symptoms start on the left side of the body, means that it is mostly a development occurring in the right hemisphere. Although normally a period of meditation involving intense concentration and practice for 5 years of some is required to bring up the Kundalini, Bentov states. That exposure to mechanical or acoustical vibrations in the range of 4 to 7 hertz cycles per second. So basically, like, you can do it Kundalini wise through transcendental meditation. However, it's going to take you 5 years when you can just use the acoustical vibration sound that ranges between 4 to 7 hertz cycles per second, and you can get a faster result. Bentov also cites as an example repeated riding in a car whose suspensions and seat combination produce that range of vibration, or being exposed for long periods of time to these frequencies caused, for instance, by an air conditioning duct. The cumulative effect of these vibrations may also be able to trigger a spontaneous physio-kundalini sequence in susceptible people who have a particularly sensitive nervous system. Interesting. So the third technique that people can use to achieve hemispheric synchronization is through biofeedback. It is a consciousness-altering methodology which will be briefly described. It is somewhat unique in that it actually employs self-cognitive powers of the left hemisphere to gain access to such areas of the right brain as the lower cerebral. So basically, biofeedback is instead of suppressing the left hemisphere is done in hypnosis, or largely bypassing and ignoring it as done in transcendental meditation. Biofeedback teaches the left hemisphere first to visualize a desired result, and then to recognize the feelings associated with the experience of successful right hemisphere access to the specific lower cerebral cortex, pain or pleasure centers, or other areas in the manner needed to produce or design result. What does that sound like to you guys? Visualization, right? Manifesting through visualization. Because what do they tell us to do when we manifest? Is to think about what we want and then tune into that vibration and then bring up visualizations of already receiving it, already having it, right? That's pretty interesting right there. So once this is done, the left brain can then repeatedly instruct the right brain to reestablish the pathways involved so as to produce the same external objective measures of success. In this very way, the pathways are strengthened and emphasized to such an extent that left brain consciousness is enabled to access appropriate areas in the right brain using the conscious demand mode. So it says right here, if someone wanted to increase the circulation in their left leg in order to speed up healing, they may concentrate with the left brain on achieving that result while carefully monitoring a digital thermometer connected to the leg. So when the effort begins to achieve success, the digital thermometer will register an increase in the temperature of the left leg. So the subject can mentally associate the sensations experienced with the result achieving and can begin to emphasize it by memory, recall the same process to cause it strengthening by affirmation and repetition. So those affirmations that we say to ourselves, when we do them in repetition, our right hemisphere is going to build a pattern with that, and it's going to be like, okay, it is done. It's already done. It's so. So that is pretty awesome. So it says, in this way, pain can be blocked, healing can be enhanced, malignant tumors can apparently be suppressed and ultimately destroyed. The body's pleasure centers can be stimulated, and a variety of specific physiological results can be achieved. Biofeedback may be used to greatly accelerate achievement of deep meditative states, particularly for beginners who have no experience in meditative techniques, and whose progress in that methodology is enhanced through effective visualization and external objective affirmation. Display of the subject's brainwave pattern on a cathode ray tube has proven to be a laboratory validated means by which subjects may quickly learn to place themselves in profoundly relaxed states characterized by the sort of quietude and singularity of mental focus associated with advanced meditation. So I'm going to stop right there for now, because that's just, whoo. So basically what they're saying is you can reach hemispheric synchronization, one, by hypnosis, which basically calming the left brain to almost a semi-sleep state, and then giving the power of suggestion of something, as I said, like when you wake up, you're going to be a chicken. I'm just simple general explanations for my simple mind. So when you wake up, you're going to be a chicken. And so the right hemisphere is like, okay, that's done. Second way is transcendental meditation, where, you know, you basically work on your kundalini rising. You know, you use your own energy source to bring that up from, like, basically your root chakra, your perineum, whatever that's called, all the way up to your head, hold it, and then bring it down, and activates your pineal gland. And then you got biofeedback, which is basically affirmations and repetition, and your right hemisphere believing everything is so. So I'm gonna leave it there for today. As I always say, you do you, boo. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. And I will see y'all in the next video.